We're on a mission to build the largest luxury Airbnb business in Japan, starting with only $60,000.
So about 33 days ago, a friend of mine reached out to me and told me that they needed to make some more income on their property and they weren't sure how they were going to do it. The property itself is a single building. However, the building has 4 units. So they reached out to me and told me that they were thinking about Airbnb-ing it, but they weren't sure how they were going to make it work. They asked me if it was something that I would be interested in taking on. And that evening, so this is when they reached out to me, it was about 8:30 p.m. I did my research in a couple of hours about the area, about the market itself, other Airbnbs in the area, how much those Airbnbs were making, this kind of stuff. And that night I drove out 11 p.m. in the evening to go and meet them in person so that we could get this property generating revenue right away. So I get there, I look over the property, and then they tell me that they've actually got another property as well, not in the same area, but about a couple hours away, where they also wanted to put that property on Airbnb as well and get that thing set up. Now, both of these are seasonal type properties, and so it's really good because there's some level of exemption to get the properties actually set up on how the laws work in BC. Fast forward a couple of days, I've agreed to take on the property, and they told me my baseline rent is going to be $9,907 a month and 7 cents to carry the property every single month so that they can make their baseline mortgage payment. So what ended up happening is I actually took the time to go through and figure out what is popular in the area, what are other competing people doing, and the fortunate thing is that this property actually came with a hot tub and a sauna, which is super uncommon in this specific area. Now the property is really nice. It's right by the lake. There's a lot of vineyards, wineries, this kind of stuff all around in that specific area. There's also a lot of like nice hiking trails, just lots of like beautiful nature, and it's just really like a vacation kind of area. It's like a super small town, but it's super popular and it's close to an area that has been steadily growing for years and years and years and years. Because of all of these factors and because the property itself, like the building itself, one is brand new and two was actually a high-end type of build, I knew that I could take this on and I could make this property work as long as it was decorated the right way. The issue with how everything had been set up before, there's actually an Airbnb operator that was doing the work with the property before, and in the past years they'd been actually running this property and they weren't able to make the money that they wanted to make, not because the property wasn't a good option, but because they were a little bit lazy with the actual setup for the property. Now, because of a lot of people that I know that are in the Airbnb space, I know how much little details actually really matter when it comes to actually setting up the property the right way and how the photos are going to work, right? You need to make sure that when you're decorating these properties and furnishing these properties, you have certain features that are very photographable so that when people actually see the listings, immediately they're like drawn to the property, right? It only needs to be a couple of photos because those photos actually grab people's attention. And once you have people's attention, they automatically perceive the value to be either the same or much higher than the value actually is. Fast forward maybe 10 more days and we've already got a basic listing up. We're in the process of getting our baseline reviews done. I'm still setting everything up, right? I'm furnishing the property. I'm actually calling up a bunch of people that I know, trying to get models actually to come in and be in the photo shoot for the property. Because the area is a little bit less known, people don't actually realize how beautiful it is and how many amazing attractions there are in the specific area. There's some things that are like well known, but especially when you're going into a more tertiary type of market, people really need to understand what the area is going to look like so that people are more comfortable with actually booking the place, because they're like, holy shit, you know, this place is cool, but what is actually in the area is going to be the real reason why people are going to want to book it, right? Like the property itself, that's nice and people will see the photos and this kind of stuff. Like the property will to some extent sell itself. However, there's also another element to Airbnb that a lot of people don't really take into consideration, which is that your property will get pushed randomly based on an area, based on random days when it's available to be booked. There's a lot of people out there that will be in a close enough area that will want to book a property. There's a lot of people that don't actually realize that people will book their trips sporadically, right? There's a lot of people that don't actually really plan out the trips in depth, right? They'll just be like, you know what? I want to have a cool experience. I don't really know what I want to do. let me go on Airbnb, let me go on Google, let me go on all these different places to just figure out what it is that I want to go and do. Because genuinely, I know I want to be in this area, but I have no idea what I want to go and do. And so then your Airbnb pops up and you've got photos of the area and what activities you can do that are close by and this kind of stuff. And people start to get drawn in, they start to make their plans and they start to book. So that's what we did really, really well with this property. And the reason I'm mentioning all of this is because fast forward 30 days after I actually went out to see the property for the very first time. The very first time I went out to see this property and I took this property on, it actually broke $20,000 in revenue. And that was with only 3 of the 4 units actually properly set up. The 4th unit hasn't even had any bookings for July yet. And we're already across 20,000 revenue. In fact, just this morning, I got another 2 bookings and we're now sitting at $23,000 in revenue for July, just now 33 days after I first looked at that property for the very first time. It's crazy, but it's not really. When you're very methodical about how you put things together, when you're very intentional about the vision for the Airbnb property, when you're very intentional about the experiences, how things are going to be perceived for people, a couple of minor things that I added in that didn't really cost all that much money and added value, but it made a huge difference to actually making this property super marketable. When I had the first photos put up for this individual property, I actually had a very, 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 very basic photographer that had experience being a photographer. He went and he did like basic photos for the property. That's what got us through the door to at least start to market the property while we actually get everything properly set up. But then following that, I actually had my high-end photographer, Lawrence Liu, who, by the way, has actually gone out and he's photographed some of the world's absolute best resorts and things like that. He's traveled to 137 different countries. I will actually link his website in the video. But he actually has had some of his photos displayed in Times Square, like New York, which is just like crazy. But the thing that's really, really cool about actually having the right kind of professional for this and even just these tiny little adjustments that people don't really recognize make a massive difference, really, really do. If you have a basic photographer and all they're doing is photographing the space, they're not actually doing very in-depth photos, ones that have substance, ones that actually elicit a certain feel from the people that are actually looking at your listing, the amount of bookings you're going to get is going to be much, much less. The other thing too is that when you're looking for a market, the bar is pretty low, even in like Western countries that have already had business like Airbnb model for a longer period of time. And setting yourself apart is really not that difficult. You know, the photographer that I hired, by the way, again, world-renowned photographer, to get everything done, he spent like a couple of days at the property. I flew him in, had him do everything together. It cost me $2,400, including his flight tickets, to come in and get the property all set up to photograph and do like all the models and do all of the just photos of the property. And you know, a world-class photographer like this compared to a normal photographer, maybe you end up paying like double the price. But I know over the span of 6 months to a year, he's going to make his money back like tenfold. And those photos are like forever, right? No matter what, people aren't going to be able to take away that amazing sort of marketing that's been done. So those extra little like 10% of adjustments and betterments make all the difference, because when all those seems minor little 10% upgrades come all together, your listing is going to end up being at least 50% better than the next guy, which can be the difference between someone booking your place and another place. The other thing too is that a lot of people don't realize is because Airbnbs are experiences, people are willing to spend the extra amount of money for those higher end experiences. So having the nicer photographer come in, having those slight ads that you add to the property to make the property look that much more like a memorable experience, that's actually going to increase your price per night as well. And people are going to be willing to pay that additional amount because it's not like a storage closet that someone is going and staying in. Instead, it's this amazing place. It's got a hot tub, that's got a sauna, that's got a rooftop stereo, for example, all these other or rooftop speakers. All of these things really add up and really make an incredible experience. High-end market is definitely what you should try to target and focus. The other thing too that I think not a lot of people actually really talk about is that if you go after the high-end market, yes, you end up spending more money in the short term. But the thing is that if you have an option to set up 3 Airbnbs that are on the lower end, or you have the opportunity to set up one single high-end Airbnb for the same price, that high-end Airbnb in the long term, you're gonna make way more money. Because the thing is that those low-end Airbnbs that are just like the throw together, very basic IKEA furniture, no decorating, all this kind of stuff. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with IKEA. That's a baseline though. Having those extra little adjustments that you add will end up making the property worth a lot more over the long period of time. And it's going to be a lot more scalable because your margins are going to be that much better.